We can have a pre-show that gets cut, and we can have a post-show that gets cut, and then an after-show that gets into a different feed.
Yeah. I figure that's probably just in general the way most of them go. It just, I don't know. I never bothered to figure out the first part of the episode. I always just worried about the ending.
Yeah. Now we're moving forward.
Yeah.
You've got some follow-up.
I do. I was completely wrong on who I was thinking the quote was attributed to.
Mm-hmm.
But John Adams stated that, remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide.
On an infinite timescale, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it also got me to thinking. I added another piece that's not technically follow-up, but quotes are inherently problematic.
Yeah.
We like to attribute a lot to quotes, but anytime you pull a line or two, or even a dozen, depending on size of the original context, it doesn't. It's an out of context restatement of something someone said, and you can always make different quotes fit different arguments, regardless of what the original intent behind the author or orator or whatever was.
Yeah, I also I don't have it in the follow-up, but I did mention that George Washington warned against the two-party system. I have his farewell address, and I was going to find the exact quote for you.
Okay.
It's only like a page and a half.
Is that all? Should you just read the whole thing?
I mean, I can. You want me to read the whole thing?
That's entirely up to you. I was being sarcastic, but I mean,
okay, I thought
yeah.
so. I was like, a page and a half is short, but it would be a lot for a podcast.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll have it for a follow up, but it is the George Washington's farewell address. I'm actually gonna have to read it to get the context because it's not as like the language isn't as clear as you might think for. Oh, two parties are bad. No, he actually said it a bit more eloquently than that. So
it's fascinating to go back and read a lot of the things that were stated by politicians in the early days in general, because a lot of them were fairly well-spoken in a way that you just don't see very often anymore.
Yeah. The style of speaking and writing, I guess I'll say writing. Well, a lot of these addresses were written and then read, so I don't know how much the style of writing differed from the day-to-day speak or even a presentation that is off the cuff, perhaps not one read, but the style of written language was quite a bit different, and there's some movies that really lean into that, and the two that come to mind are True Grit with I'm blanking on the name, Jeff Bridges, and Pirates of the Caribbean. Anyway,
I think there are a number of others that probably fit well in that general vein, because I remember a number of things about the way things were delivered, at least in like Tombstone and Wyatt Earp, that are reminiscent of that as well.
I feel like the remake of True Grit was like heavily leaned into this particular style of speech, and it was a lot of fun. It was very amusing to watch it. It's the one that I feel was pervasive throughout the whole movie and readily obvious. So, whereas like in Tombstone, there are the way some folks, but or some of the lines that were just like, oh, that felt modern, whereas I think in True Grit almost everything feels antiquated.
That makes sense.
So I got to thinking about the way we were talking and about the American reality versus the American dream, and how it's affected even sports. And the reason I brought it up is because I was kind of schooled about it when the Super League was getting a lot of backlash, and I was privy to some of the comments and thinking through an Arsenal Facebook group that I'm a part of. And, I was just kind of like, I don't really think it's that big of a deal. And they're like, yeah, it's a big deal. It's like, it was funny because he's like, do you want it to be like the NFL? And I'm like, I do have criticisms of the NFL, just mainly regarding you're just playing the same, umpteen teams over and over and over and over again, and your players get moved around, this and that, and there's no real advancement if like they do in the FA. You have the Premier League, you have the Champion League, and various leagues below that, where every once in a while you get like a kind of a big upset. Leeds United coming in and win. They won the Champion League, and then they advanced and won the Premier League right after. It's a huge upset, and so we don't have that. So that was like one thing that where you just have this. I don't want to call it a cesspool because the players that play in the NFL, they're really talented, but they don't go play anywhere else, and it's just sort of insular, much like America. And then you have the idea that the owner could just like on a whim, I'll say a whim, but it's if he just decides that he wants to move the team from Los Angeles to Oakland, he does, I'm sure there's some things to consider, but that was relatively unobstructed. And so I remember somebody talking about how that was, they were not okay with an owner being able to just take the team and move it somewhere else that felt more financially or made some financial gain for the owner. So that was sort of what I had in mind about that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it's difficult to really appreciate the differences coming from growing up around the way the American sports leagues are done. Unless you have followed any, I don't even know if it's any, unless you have followed football in general on an international scale from, an early age, pretty much everything you've known growing up in this country would be that you have competition among teams. You can expand that by adding teams. That has happened. You could have teams removed, dissolved, theoretically. But there aren't really multiple divisions that the teams move across. There are just divisions that are categories based on size of the organizational unit, I guess, for lack of better phrasing, and access to resources. So, going to like school-aged groups, you have divisions based on size of school, and I don't know if anything financial comes into play there, but I don't even know what officially the divisions are, but I know you can move in those divisions, but that movement is not based on performance. That movement is based on like per capita, population density, and other factors, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of an alien concept to us from a sports world perspective to have these organized divisions that you can move up and down in based on your performance. And I understand the appeal for both. I do prefer the European idea that the top 2, 3 get promoted up, assuming that there's a division available above them, and the bottom 3 get relegated, because it gives a much more interesting dynamic to the fact that there are repercussions.
Yeah, I mean it's
but at the same time there are repercussions from the American perspective. They're just not based on, oh, these people don't get to play in this division. It's based on this team doesn't have access to the resources they would have access to make the team better, or with the draft, you have placement in the draft based on performance at least. So there are just different components to it. And so I can understand why they're different, but I also see that it makes the American view of sports drastically different from the rest of the world.
Yeah, but you have the same. You've got 32 teams, and they have about 55 players per team. So you have the same, group of players just shuffling around all in one league. And sometimes, some change is based, is driven by money, and that's the same in European football as well. So there's that, but you've got a lot of different leagues, not just for each country, and then they have leagues, tiers of leagues as well. So you've got anywhere from a town team that could possibly do. I remember hearing about, I don't remember what the team was, but just like this sort of just kind of like just a city, a town had a team, and they just kept on the day making the wins, and they advanced, and they ended up playing Chelsea. Like, it was a big deal. It'd be like a pickup. It's a little bit more than a pickup team, but more or less like a team of nobody that you've ever heard of. Nobody, the fans are going to be like friends and family and neighbors. Ended up playing Chelsea, which is one of the best teams in the world. So that's kind of cool. But the other thing is like you've also got in the relegation zone, some teams fighting for their chance to stay in the league that they're currently in, so they don't get demoted to another league. And that can be some of the most exciting and best played matches of the whole season. So that's such a fun dynamic. I remember when the NCAA went to a playoff system, there was I remember a lot of people were like, oh, okay, this is better than being ranked, but there's a lot of like, playoffs for real? This is going to be kind of, there's some hesitation to that as well, and even some, I'm sure there was plenty of backlash, but it was hard for some people. It was a hard to swallow pill for some folks.
Yeah, I just have to interject that the playoff system that was introduced is still just a load of horse shit.
Yeah.
For those unfamiliar, even though I don't think we have any international listeners anyway, but the playoff system still relies on a group of individuals subjectively ranking teams up to the point of the playoffs, and then the top, 4, 6 are in the playoffs.
I don't know. I don't watch.
Like, everything up to that point is still the same subjective ranking system that used forever. And so it's BS. It is completely irrelevant until you have rankings based on performance only, not on this concept of strength of schedule or strength of opponent or anything else, but literally just win-loss record, or introduce a point system for wins versus losses. Well, you don't have draws in American football. So, you could add another category if you wanted to for like point difference or something to have some additional level of categorization. But at the end of the day, the current implementation is still just as shitty and stupid as the previous one, except it's now in the name of some level of equity for playoff spots.
Yeah. The whole sport is quite a bit different, in that there's so much stoppage time. And I don't want this to be like me complaining about what I don't like about the sport, but it's played with a different type of intensity. There's a lot of stoppage time, and I feel like the American mindset won't allow for a draw. Whereas proper football, there's a strategy, there's an execution of that strategy, and sometimes you don't have a win, and that affects an entire campaign.
Yeah, I will say that's very much a innate component of all sports in the U.S. And that being that you have to have a victor and you have to have a loser. The only place, well, I can't say this with certainty, but I assume that MLS follows generally the same idea as the European leagues, but I don't know that for sure.
They do.
So at least there you have the concept of a draw and, points and accumulated for, a similar, same sport, different continent, different implementation, but similar, at least, set of rules.
Yeah.
And the only reason I say different implementation is because there's no concept of relegation. It's still, just a professional league. It's taking the same general American mindset of league play at a paid-for professional level and just implementing it with international football.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
It's almost like a domestic version of what the Super League would have been.
Yeah, I think so. I was just, I was gonna say it's the place where older players come to retire.
I don't know if that's entirely fair. There are a lot of younger players that aren't capable of playing in Europe, but are able to play in the United States and gets them valuable time. And I'm thinking predominantly of players from within the realm of the Copa America. So, Costa Rica. I think it may have been Costa Rica that I'm thinking of, but either way, Costa Rica, Trinidad and Tobago, a number of the South American countries as well, Mexico for sure. That they do at least get professional game time, and that helps with their development for the international teams.
Yeah, so I meant it's the place where international superstars come to retire. That's what I meant by that. I need to qualify, but yeah, because the majority of the league is young people that don't qualify for Europe. And I will say the league is getting better and better every year. So that's only good for the continent.
There are a surprising number of American players finally getting some level of recognition in different European leagues. I certainly don't have a list, but there, of course, I only know of one high-profile one, which would be Christian Pulisic, who is playing for Chelsea. But I know that a couple of Americans are in the English leagues, and a couple are in, I think, the German leagues. So it's starting to be something that's more commonplace than the extreme rarities that we've had in the past.
Yeah. 20 years ago, I think Alexi Lawless was a substitute for Arsenal. Like he was on the bench for Arsenal. I don't know how much. I don't think he got much playing time, but that's where we are now is a far cry from that, and that's a good thing for people coming up and loving the sport in this country. So I do believe that if the United States was like the rest of the world as far as what sport they played, like if football was the main sport, baseball is the national pastime, but the NFL is the main sport in this country. People love that sport. I think it draws more viewership than any of the other sports. But if our main sport was proper football, we'd have more stars than anybody else.
Oh, for sure. I think basketball is pretty close in the realm of viewership as American football. Pretty close being relative to other sports, not necessarily a direct comparison between the two. But generally speaking, it wasn't until maybe the past decade, maybe a little bit longer, that many people even had a concept of international football in the States, and a lot of that is owed to the dominance of the women's national team.
I thought it was the more and more immigrants that we were getting. I mean, that's not. I mean, that's not
I know what you mean. Part of it. But and it's certainly there's more exposure based on the number of people who follow international football that are exposing other people to it. But I really think most of it has to do with the exposure to the Olympics and the women's national team.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't thought about the women's national team, but yeah, a lot of people enjoy them. I got put off by them in, I can't remember if it was 2007 or 2011, but I know people are, this is an unpopular opinion, but I was really put off by some of the players at the end of a match with like 10 minutes remaining, going to the corner and making the opponent try to take the ball and like either try to win a goal kick or a corner, or not a corner kick, a goal kick or a throw in. And I just found that so off-putting.
Yeah, there are a number of things over the past, I don't know, 5 to 8 years that have been really politicized, both from a standpoint of the way the game is played and from an actual political standpoint, that have made it difficult to follow because there's not a cohesive narrative. It's a lot of individual players doing things. And that, to me, a national team is not a place for that. Either the team is making a statement together, or it doesn't need to be something that the team is involved in. It's different to me when you're talking about the individual players and when they're not playing for the national team. And I know that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, but it's one of those things that, to me, when you're representing the national team, the team should have a cohesive playbook, style, everything together that is a part of that team identity. And that's that. And that's driven by coach, management, staff, players, etc. But all that to say that there seems to have been a change to that over the past couple of years where it is more cohesive. And I don't know if that's just because I haven't paid as much attention, or if there is actually more of that element kind of being introduced at the team level, because the men's team also seems to be more cohesive and more of a singular kind of entity than it used to be, as far as kind of looking at it from the periphery. But I do wonder how much of that is just because I quit following the national teams at all for a while because I just got tired of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of that goes hand to hand with just being tired of a lot of things about the nation as a whole over the past few years. So
I honestly got really, they didn't qualify for the World Cup in 2018, so there was nobody to root for. But also, I don't like, I'm not the dynamic of the fan base is sort of weird because we're in the sport, we're such underdogs. But as a nation, we are not underdogs. And I always felt so weird having a team of third and fourth rate athletes playing the top athletes in pretty much every other country we compete against. Maybe not Canada. And that's just such a weird dynamic to me. Does that make sense?
It does. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's one of those things that, I mean, if you step back and abstract it a little bit, it is really a manifestation of the way most Americans view the world. That we are among the elite. That we're on top of most things. But here's a sport that we, generally speaking, are in the bottom half of the rankings for. And it's a really difficult thing to be interested in when you consistently underperform your expectations or underperform against your expectations, especially when you've seen the opposite of that on the women's side and you don't understand the differences. But if you do understand the differences, it comes as no surprise that the women were dominant for so long, because no other country had really funneled resources into the women's teams. And so it was a fortunate byproduct of that we happened to have better athletes at the time, even though I think if you were to actually go look at the dominant women's team era, those athletes really weren't that good compared to the equivalent athletes in a lot of places. It's just that those places didn't have competitive teams.
Right. Our university and college system was the development for the women's national team.
Right.
You had, it is a top tier sport at that level. It ranks there with basketball and softball. I think those are the other two sports that are pretty, the other team sports that are played a lot, and soccer is among them. And so there was a unexpected built-in national development. And so when the Women's World Cup comes, or when they implement a Women's World Cup, it's like the United States women play, and it's just like they were already good because the infrastructure existed. And so I know in the 2000s, other countries started developing their women's leagues and their women's national teams, and the United States was no longer dominant, but they came back, and now I think they're pretty well ranked on the world scene.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where they fall currently, but I know they're still considered one of the top handful of teams. I mean, the one thing that has been interesting, I happened to catch a match not too terribly long ago. I don't know for sure when, but just watching a few snippets or a short time frame, they looked less lethargic than I felt like they looked the last time I really followed them. And then I realized it's because most of the older players are no longer playing, and there's actually some youth on the team again. And that makes a huge difference.
It does. I think the sport also got faster. I remember watching, again, in 2007, I remember watching the Women's World Cup, and just all the teams in general, they looked slow. I mean, they were slower than their male counterparts, and I don't think I caught any of the 2011 World Cup, but maybe not even the 2015. Either the 2015 or the 2019 World Cup. I remember watching the women play, and I was like, "Oh, they've gotten faster." Like, generally speaking, like no team specifically, but the quality of play got better. The speed of the players was up, and so it's getting to a place where the women's World Cup play is getting pretty close to the quality of men. That seems like a shitty thing to say as a man.
I get that. But it's very true. I also noticed, I happened to catch a little bit of one of the men's team matches earlier this year, and one of the things that has been a criticism of mine of the U.S. team is that after watching Premier League play, the men's national team here in the States just looks like geriatrically slow.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching part of the match and thinking, oh, that doesn't look as bad or as disparate from what I'm accustomed to as it normally does. Not to say that it was on par, but it's getting better, and getting better quickly, to the point that I think we might be in a roughly 4 to 8 year time frame of maybe being competitive on the international stage, like properly competitive, not just a fluke 1 year or one,
like 2002.
Olympics. Yeah. And so we'll see, but I certainly have hope for the men's team based off of what I last saw.
Yeah. I was going to say, though, that somewhere between 2007 and 2015, the Women's World Cup gameplay exceeded MLS gameplay in quality.
Just for clarification, are we talking about MLS as a whole or women's MLS?
Oh, sorry, men's MLS as a whole.
I figured that's what you meant, but I wanted to clarify. Yeah, in the States, there are men's and women's teams in MLS.
I didn't know that. Or I didn't know there was a women's team. Or a women's league. Whew, I am not doing well here.
I wouldn't have known if not for the fact that I looked up a couple of the national team players just to see where they played, and then realized that there were separate leagues.
Huh. Are there any, well, that's...
You can go ahead and ask. I probably don't have the answer, but...
No, yeah, I was just saying it's not the time and the place, but how many women from the United States play in European leagues?
I know that a couple have in general, but I don't know if that is a regular thing. I don't know of anybody for sure currently, but I know I have heard of a couple over the past decade or so that have played in Europe.
I really thought we were going to turn this American reality has infected sports into a full-on topic. I was ready to keep going with this as a topic.
We can.
I don't know what to say now.
Well, I know we've kind of turned it into more of a general discussion about the state of sport. To be fair, though, I really wasn't sure where we were going with that topic when I read it.
Yeah, it was just it's just a microcosm of what's happening in the United States. A few wealthy capitalists control everything, and we're given just enough entertainment to not want to burn it all down.
See, that opens up a whole separate discussion. Is it really a matter of having a certain amount of entertainment, or is it the seemingly innate American apathy?
So it's a little bit of what I just described. It's a lot of the apathy because we just don't know better. Even though it turns out that the boiling the frog slowly isn't actually, you can't actually do that. The frog will jump out before you boil it. You can't slowly turn up the water and boil a frog away. But we're there. We're the frog in the boiling water, and we just don't know. We don't care. Very typical American attitude of I like things how they are, and I think sports is a really good place to start talking about this. It's like, who would come in and say, "Oh, we can do something better"? Well, why would we say, "Oh, we can do something better"? Like, what's the point of, this is the system. What is there to be gained by, doing something quote unquote better?
I get the argument, but I have a counter to it.
Okay.
I'm not so sure it's the concept of something better. I think it's more a matter of it's not my place to decide how it's done. And I look to this position of authority to guide that development. And so if they say this is better, or they say this is what's going to be done, okay, that's what's going to be done. But it's not something that I have a hand in shaping because I have no influence over it. And so I just enjoy what I receive or get out of it as a consumer, and kind of look at it as something that's not out of reach necessarily. I don't think that's quite the same thing, but something that is not within my purview. And the reason I describe it that way is because I think that the American view of government in general mimics that quite a bit. The vast majority of people look to a person that is elected to make things better or to guide things, and they don't realize how much influence they have over that because there's such a ingrained idea of, well, I don't have a way to influence that. And there's no connection between, I may not have a way to influence that, but if I go talk to these 100 other people and work together, I can definitely influence that. There's a disconnect there. And I think sports mimics that. Because there's no, well, if we band together and don't buy tickets, then they have to listen. Or, some other manifestation of that, obviously, but that's just an example. That if I work with other fans of this team, I can effect change. That's not the idea or sentiment. The idea is, well, I don't have any control over it, so I'll take whatever they say.
Has there ever been a time when I guess there have been a few times. I feel like they wanted to move the Saints, maybe.
Well, in the U.S. in general, there's pretty much no fan influence over sports.
Yeah, I want to say, I feel like there was just one time that it's happened, and that was kind of a fluke. But that was the point I was going to bring up. It's like, how many times has anyone gotten together and changed or influenced any league in any sport in the United States? With maybe an exception of once or twice.
But yeah, but that's kind of the point. You can abstract that a little bit and ask the question, how many times have groups of people in the United States gotten together and affected change?
Yeah, we did that once in 1776, and then I think some fuckheads tried to do that in 1860, or 1861, but they got beat up, and that's about it.
Well, in fairness, there were a couple of attempts in 2020. One gained some popular opinion, one did not. And, There are instances where groups of people have come together.
Oh, the civil rights.
And they either have or have not had. Yeah, I mean, you can go back to the 60s as well and talk about the civil rights movement. But generally speaking, how often do Americans set aside individual pursuits for a group pursuit? That's the question.
It's pretty rare.
And when it happens, most of the time, it gains some level of traction.
Yeah.
Or even if it doesn't gain traction, it creates enough of a ripple or enough of an effect to create discussion. And the reason I changed the phrasing is because if you go back to January 6th, it certainly created a talking point and has influenced a number of things since then, even though it was a failed insurrection attempt. But it was a group of Americans coming together for, albeit misguided, for an idea, and it has influenced a number of things since then. Some positive, some negative. So, historically speaking, when we've had groups of Americans get together and pursuing something as a group, it has led to change in some fashion. I think that's a relatively fair statement.
Oh yeah, yeah, and if you, the whole point of, or the whole way this our government was set up was so that if enough people agreed to do something, we could do those things. It's not the whim of the mob, but the will of the people. And you are right. We, from time to time, people do band together and they do make an impact on the way of life in this country. Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Yeah, the big thing is just that the number of times that occurs is pretty small, or minute, or infinitesimal, or I don't know, pick a word.
You know, too many times we're just too busy and too comfortable minding our own businesses. We have, and in some cases there are enough of us that live in a world of privilege that allows us to not have to fight the system or be a part of it. Fight the system, that's a silly thing to say. Just be a part of the system.
I agree, but I do have a kind of further statement there as well. I'm not so sure that encapsulates it quite as neatly as it seems to. Like at first listen, for sure, I agree. But I think in order to really understand that, you have to step back a little bit and think about the American educational experience and what we're exposed to across the board. In school, everything you're taught, typically speaking, focuses on if you apply yourself, if you do these things, if you work hard, etc., you can do, or you can be, or you can become whatever it is that you desire to be. You have a dream, you have a goal, and you work toward that goal. And so I don't necessarily think it's a lack of wanting to come together necessarily and effect change. I think it's a matter of most people, everything they know is, I just need to keep working toward this goal, and I need to do so within the rules of the system as we know it. So I just think there's a lack of recognizing the systemic components there. It's more a matter of, well, I've always been taught if I just keep on working hard and doing what I can to move another step forward, I'll get there eventually.
Right.
And it's difficult to explain that outside of the States, of course, but it's tough to kind of describe that mentality in a way that really gets it across. Because I know I'm not doing it justice.
No, I actually had a conversation about this exact thing, just slightly different context not too long ago. And it was about Trump's base. If you look at Trump's base, it's like they tend to be voting against their interests because a lot of Trump's policies were going to benefit the upper middle class and the wealthy and very wealthy. But he's almost entirely supported by a base that doesn't fit into that demographic. But if you think about it, this is speculation, but I don't think any of them see themselves as like poor people, or they would never go on welfare. They would never ask for a handout because they're going to work hard, and if they keep working hard, they'll eventually get to the level, maybe not, the level that Trump has gotten to, but they're going to get out of the hole that they're in. They just keep working hard.
Yeah, I think there are two big components to that, and I kind of want to dissect them, but it feel like looking at the timer, we're at a good spot to have this become the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
How about we take a quick pause, and then come back and go into it?
Okay. Then I feel like we were about to get into that last thing I have there about education.
Yeah, I was guiding the conversation that way.
Cool.
So we'll take a quick break just so I can get up and grab another drink, and then I'll be right back.
Yeah, I'll take a little bio break and get some more water.
All right, sounds good.
All right. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after-show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.